Hello YouTube, this is Yugioh, and we're here live on twitch.tv/Yugioh. So say what's up to the Twitch chat. Today we're going to be going over my top 16 deck from YCS Sacramento this past weekend. I ended up playing Fiendsmith Snake Eye, and I ended up finishing top 16. So for my matchups, round 1, I played against Virtual World, or not Virtual World, Voices Voice, and I won 2-0. Round 2, I played against Sprite, Fiendsmith, won 2-0. Round 3, played against Tempai, lost 2-0. Round 4, another Tempai, won 2-0. Round 5, played against Branded, won 2-0. Round 6, I played against Yugioh, won 2-1. Round 7, I played against Snake Eye, won 1-0. Game 1 took 40 minutes, and then game 2, he wasn't able to burn me, so I won in time. Round 8, I played against another Snake Eye, 1-1. Round 9, I played against Snake Eye Fire King, 1-0. Round 10, I played against Yugioh, 1-0. Round top 32, I played against Snake Eye, 1-1, and then top 64, I played against another Snake Eye and lost 1-2. So I just wanted to go over that real quick before we hop into the deck profile, and I'll be answering Twitch's questions as we go along. So for the actual deck list, for the main deck we played, so I'm saying we because the main person I tested with and the main person I test with and deck build with is Gabriel Susi. For those who don't know, Gabriel Susi is the 2019 European champion and 2-time world competitive, and he's one of my best Yu-Gi-Oh friends, you know. So we build all of our decks as of recently. We've been building our decks together, theorying together, and playing events together. So for this, we ended up landing on Snake Eye Fiendsmith. After the event, or retrospectively, we both kind of agree that maybe Snake Eye Fiendsmith wasn't the correct choice for the event. Not as in Snake Eye Fiendsmith wasn't the best deck, because every time that a deck is quote unquote the best deck, that doesn't mean that it's the best choice for an event. Say for instance, Ibra, who, shout out to him, he ended up getting top 16. Him and Pac decided to play Whitewood Runic, not because they thought it was quote unquote the highest ceiling deck or the best deck, but they thought it was the best choice in order to perform well at the tournament. And Ibra ended up going X1 in Swiss, but he started off like 16-0 in games day 1. He finished undefeated. So yeah, maybe a different deck was a better choice than Snake Eye, but I really wanted to play Snake Eye because after my performance at the NAWCQ, it was a little lackluster. So I really wanted to end off the season doing well with Snake Eye, and I thought I could win this event. Once I hit top cut, I was like, okay, if I draw well, if I don't like completely break, I know I can play better than everyone here, and I'm pretty sure I can win this tournament. But I ended up drawing a little bit subpar when I needed to draw well. But yeah, so for the actual deck list, we played 2 copies of Snake Eye Ash, 2 copies of Poplar, 2 copies of Bonfire, and 1 1-for-1. I'm going to split up the deck list into sections, and we'll talk about each section. So this first section is the Snake Eye starter package. I already see that some people in chat are asking what is the reasoning behind 2 Snake Eye Ash and 2 Bonfire. This is very controversial. A lot of people have been criticizing me and Susi for playing this. We were playing this all the way back at the NAWCQ, and we continued to play it even going into this event. Our theory about this hasn't changed, and we still believe that this is the correct ratio. So the reasoning is we wanted to keep the deck at 40 because of one main reason, and it's we want to see our more impactful side deck cards. When you play a deck list over 40, you can get the mathematics and the ratios in order to see similar hand structures to when you play 40. For instance, like if you go up to like 45, 46, 47, you'll be able to get hands where you see 2 to 3 non-engine with 1 to 2 engine cards. You can get those same ratios, but you're adding card in order to force yourself up to that number. You're adding undesirable cards to your deck in order to keep that ratio. So what I mean is, in order to play the maximum amount of engine while still seeing a good amount of non-engine, naturally and logically, you're gonna have to add more non-engine to your deck in order to keep that balance. But once you get to a certain point, you're adding cards to your deck that aren't as good as the cards that you want to have in your base 40. So for instance, when you start going over 40, you're gonna see people start adding cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit to the main, Ghost Mourner and whatever, Chill to the main. Just cards that are worse than the hand traps that we want to be seeing and playing in our main deck, in order to keep that balance of not drawing too much engine and too little non-engine. Because we're in a format right now where going second, in order to be comfortable, you have to be drawing two to three non-engine going second. You really want to be drawing 3. 2 is where you have to be at base, and you're not winning consistently the games where you draw 2 hand trap, unless it's Nibiru paired with like an Imperm or something to like force an Appaloosa. You're not winning those games consistently if you draw like an Ash and an Imperm. Those games, if your opponent draws 3 engine cards, you're losing those games. And that's not something that's been consistent in past Snake Eye formats. In past Snake Eye formats, if you drew Veil or Imperm and your opponent opened Ash plus Witch, they ended on SP. Now if you draw Veil or Imperm and your opponent opens Ash plus Witch, you get full comboed and you lose the game. So yeah, basically by going over 40, you're adding worse cards to your deck in order to keep a balance of engine to non-engine, and we just didn't want to do that. So in order to keep that balance of 18, 17 non-engine, 18 engine, and then our bricks that we have to play, we were forced to cut down on engine cards. We already were suspicious of Snake Eye Ash and 40 cards because the deck is already very high on normal summons. If we count our normal summons in so we can count our normal summons now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this list has 6 normal summons. If you play 40 with 3 Snake Ash, you have 7 normal summons, which is already a lot. We already have a lot of normal summons, but we decided to cut down on the normal summon because, again, unlike before in past Snake Eye formats, the deck is less reliant on Snake Eye Ash than it ever has been. Before, you had to maximize on copies of Snake Eye Ash because you needed Snake Eye Ash to resolve in order to win the game. Your combos were a lot less good, or I would say a lot less powerful if Snake Eye Ash gets negated. That's not true anymore. If you have Snake Eye Ash plus Witch and your Snake Eye Ash gets stopped, your Witch resolving allows you to do your full combo, which wasn't true before. You would have to end on a half board if your Snake Eye Ash got stopped before. So yeah, we were comfortable cutting down by solving 2 issues. One, the repetitiveness of drawing certain duplicate cards that I'll also talk about, but we also cut down on the normal summon from our deck. So to talk about Bonfire, the reason why we decided to also cut down on Bonfire is because we felt that Bonfire was the worst extender in the deck. What I mean by that is Bonfire is a very tricky card. Like when people talk about Bonfire, they say it's a starter and an extender. Yes, it is a starter and an extender. I can't deny that is true, but it is the worst of both, if that makes sense. It's the worst starter of the Snake Eye starters. It is the worst starter next to 1-for-1 because it can be ashed, and it's the worst extender because it's only an extender if your opponent stops your initial play. So say for instance you open up Ash plus Bonfire, which is in your range of 2 engine cards. You want to build your deck to have a range of opening 2 engine cards, 2 non-engine, and the way that Snake Eye is, you'll usually have 1 undesirable card in your hand. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. And say for instance your 2 engine cards are Snake Eye Ash and Bonfire. Those are your 2 engine cards that you've drawn. If you normal summon Snake Eye Ash and Snake Eye Ash resolves, then your Bonfire becomes an additional dead card in your hand. So your ratio, so you're really only playing with 3 cards in your hand realistically, because your Snake Ash resolves, turning off your Bonfire becomes a dead card. You already are playing Snake Eye, so you've drawn an undesirable card, which is like usually one of these cards down here, or like a duplicate, like a Snake Eye Ash plus a Poplar, a Snake Eye Ash, yeah, basically like a Snake Eye Ash plus a Poplar, a Snake Eye Ash plus one of these 5 cards down here. So you already have an undesirable card. So yeah, Bonfire was just the worst extender. It's also the worst extender when you go second, because if you normal summon a Snake Eye Ash into a board, if your opponent stops Snake Eye Ash, that just means that they're very unexperienced with the deck and their understanding of the Snake Eye deck is very low. Because say for instance you have an Appaloosa on the board, and I can't lie, this happened to me during the event. If I go normal summon Snake Eye Ash, and and your opponent has an Appaloosa, you're 100% supposed to let Snake Eye Ash resolve. Snake Eye Ash is always resolving if you have Appaloosa, because then you negate the Poplar in the hand, and it turns off their Bonfire. So if you have an understanding of the deck, then Bonfire just becomes worse and worse the better you understand the deck, and the better your opponent understands how to interact with your cards. So that's why we ended up cutting down on Bonfire. The next issue with the Snake Eye deck that we wanted to address was the repetitiveness of Snake Eyes. And that kind of goes into the Bonfire situation, where Snake Eye has a lot of hard once per turn cards that people are playing at 3 that you don't want to draw together. We can go down a list of cards like that. Like when you open up Poplar plus Bonfire, Snake Eye Ash plus Bonfire, Engraver plus Track, Witch plus Wanted. You have a lot of conflicting cards or repetitive cards in your engine, and we're in a format right now where you want as many cards in your hand to be as live as possible, so we wanted to cut down on that repetitiveness. That's also why we decided not to play 3 copies of Engraver. It's just a card that you don't really want to see multiple cards of the engine in your hand at any given time. You don't want to draw multiple of these cards, but you need a second one for your combos. So we played 2. It was fine. I wouldn't change anything in this top row. We decided to also, so in order to keep the engine count up, we decided to throw in a 1-for-1 instead of the 3rd Bonfire. It just diversifies the type of cards you can draw in your hand. So instead of drawing like a Ash plus a Bonfire, we can draw like an Ash plus a 1-for-1, and it just diversifies the cards that we can open. Next, for the Witches and Wanteds, I just spoke on the repetitiveness of cards, and Witch plus Wanted is like the most obvious one that people know, because you always feel it when you draw Witch plus Wanted or Witch plus Witch. It doesn't feel great, but the reason why we decided to max out on these 6 cards is because Witch is it is the best extender in Snake Eye. It's by far the best extender in Snake Eye. It's a card you always want to draw in your hand. It's not a normal summon. It gets dead cards out of your hand. Sometimes, going second, it gets live cards out of your hand, like Flamber's Dragon. It's a way to get rid of Flamber's Dragon out of your hand, etc., etc. Put Fiendsmith in the graveyard in weird situations. Put Poplar in the graveyard. It's a very good card, and it's the best extender in the deck. And now, because of Necroquip in the Moonlink, drawing Witch plus a hand trap is also full combo. So it's just a card we always want to see. And the plus side of drawing Witch plus Wanted, as opposed to drawing like a Snake Eye Ash plus a Bonfire, is that, say for instance, you activate Wanted in the draw phase, it resolves, you add your Snake Eye Diabell or whatever, you pitch it for Witch. If the Witch resolves, then the Wanted still has value because it gets you a draw. As opposed to like a Snake Eye Ash and a Bonfire, where if the Snake Eye Ash resolves, then the Bonfire has no value. If Witch resolves, Wanted still has value because it cycles itself for another card that can be a non-engine. So that was the basic theory behind why we still, even though we're arguing that Snake Eye has repetitiveness, we decided to still max out on those 6 cards, because those cards are less problematic to draw together and you still get value. Then the one of Spell and Traps, you have to play these cards. These cards are great. Poplar and Diabell Star targets. We toyed around with the idea of cutting the Field Spell and Snake Eye Diabell just to cut down on bricks, but you can't really cut them. They're too important going first in order to help you play around Nibiru, and I feel like they're just as important going second in order to push into mirror match boards. You need them. So we can't cut them. Another thing that we toyed around with was the idea of, again, trying to cut repetitiveness. What we did and what we thought about and what we ended up scrapping the night before decklist were due was the idea of playing 1 Poplar, 1 Birch. I know everyone in the TCG community would have roasted the shit out of us if we played Birch, and people had heard that I was testing Birch and they were already roasting me, but you know, people usually don't think about stuff before they start judging. You know, they just see things that they're not used to, and then they just start judging without actually theorizing or thinking of why a person is doing something. So for a minute, we thought about playing Birch instead of a second Poplar. The reason was we wanted to make it so that when we drew Ash plus Bonfire, that Bonfire was still a live card. The second Poplar, the reason why we ended up not going with Birch instead of the second Poplar is because of the hands where you draw Poplar as your normal summon plus an extender. If you draw the 50-50 and draw a Birch in that situation, then it is very bad. So we ended up not going with the Birch, even though the pros of Birch were there. There were merits to playing Birch, making specifically to make Bonfire a better card. We opted not to go for it because we valued Poplar as a actual normal summon. When you don't draw the Snake Ash, you draw Poplar plus Witch, Poplar plus Engraver. It's still a very good normal summon. So we opted to play the second Poplar instead of a Birch. As for the non-engine, it's split up into two different sections. We have the body non-engine cards and then the preventative non-engine cards, and we'll talk about these two in a minute and this. So for the body non-engine cards, we decided to play 3 Nibiru and 6 Bishtuls. Going into this event, I was certain that at least for the mirror match, the Bishtuls were some of the best hand traps. Putting bodies on the board on the opponent's turn is so crazy against the mirror match. The extra deck has cut a lot of the utility cards that existed in past Snake Eye formats. So now having bodies on the opponent's turn is really hard for them to out. They have to go out of their way to out your bodies, and they don't have a lot of options to get rid of them. The main ways that they have to get rid of them are Engraver's effect and then SP. After that, they can't really get rid of bodies that you put up on their turn. And Engraver's graveyard effect or on-field effect is only real if they have the Requiem still in circulation, or sometimes with the Bishops you can wait until they shuffle it back, and then that's a body they can't get rid of, and then you're fine with them summoning SP on their turn, because then they lose the double banish on your turn. You'd rather them banish a Bishtul that you put up on their turn than them banish your Snake Eye Ash and then have another trade for another Snake Eye card on your turn or a Diabell Star. So you're fine with that trade. Either you just make their end board worse by putting bodies on their field or on your field on their turn that they have to answer. And then Nibiru is the blowout card that you want to draw with any of the preventative hand traps. Then for the preventative hand traps, 3 Ash, 3 Imperm, they're the best preventative hand traps. You have to play them. Then for this event, we decided to play 1 copy of Effect Veiler and 1 copy of Gamma. So we played 1 less non-engine card in our deck than we have been. Before, our ratio was 18-18-4. Now our ratio was 18-17-5. And what I mean is 18 engine, 17 non-engine, 5 bricks. Which sounds like a lot, but 4 to 5 bricks, you're still averaging a brick per hand, which is true even if this was like another non-engine card or another engine card. So we, based on our theory and our mathematics that we did, we were fine with playing the Gamma. So a lot of people see Gamma and then immediately think of the 1-to-1 ratio with Driver, not realizing that the mathematics behind the entire deck is you're averaging a brick per hand. No matter what this was. Say for instance, this Driver didn't exist. You could play Gamma by itself and you played a second Veiler. You're still averaging a brick per hand. With the 4 bricks, you're still averaging a brick per hand. And if you add the Driver, it doesn't change that much. You're still averaging about a brick per hand. So if I'm averaging a brick per hand with 4 bricks or 5 bricks, why not add a bomb card to my deck that if I draw changes the game? Like for instance, you cannot compare the value of a Veiler to the value of Gamma. Gamma is a card that if drawn by itself has the potential to just win you the game alone. Lurie doesn't count as the best normal summon. What are you talking about? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely the best normal summon. But yeah, so you're still averaging a brick per hand. You're adding a bomb card to your deck that can single-handedly win you the game if you draw it, and it synergizes well with your body hand traps. It's another hand trap that we can hold forever with Nibiru. It's a card that can't be cross-outed because no one has cross-out for Gamma, so it's an uncross-outable card. It's uncalled viable. It plays around Shifter. It plays around Mochummy. It beats those cards. It's an insane hand trap. It's insane. It's an insane hand trap. If you go down the pros versus the cons of Gamma, think about it. If you make a chart You know, like how you do in school, what are the pros and cons? What are the pros and cons of Gamma? You have a list of pros. We can go on. We can go down the list of pros for Gamma, and then you say, what are the cons? Driver. That is the only con. Think about it. What is the only real con to the hand trap Gamma is driver. The only con is really driver, and the fact that you can't use it when you have a monster on the board. But that's not really even a con, because it's a hand trap, and it's a powerful hand trap. Like, you don't really care about that. The only con to Gamma is driver. But Gamma has a list of pros and amazing interactions that it has in the current metagame. So we decided to play it. It won me my top 32 match. I didn't draw driver too much. I might have drawn driver 1 or 2 times, and it didn't really matter. Like, it's my 1 brick in hand. Like, it's not like I drew driver plus a bunch of other bricks. It's like driver is my 1 brick, and I have 4 other cards I'm playing with, you know? Driver is level 6. That is another thing. Driver is also level 6, so if you summon on your turn, it can make Beatrice, etc. So that is it for the main deck, and then obviously we have the 4 bricks that you can't cut. You have to play. So that's it for the main deck. 40 cards, clean. I love the main deck. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change the main deck, honestly. Nothing about my main deck I would change. If I had to play the event again this weekend, I would play the same main deck, card for card. Extra deck, we have 1 Beatrice, 1 Necroquip, 1 Lacrima, 1 Desiree. I think that you can't really cut these cards. As for the rest of the Fiendsmith engine, 1 Requiem, 1 Sequence, 1 Moonlink. Can't cut these cards. For the generics, you have 1 Anima, 1 Phoenix, 1 IP, 1 SP, 1 Hida, 1 Promethean, Celine, Appaloosa. I mean, it's standard. There's nothing really here to talk about. The only thing that is slightly something to talk about is Necroquip. I know that some people have been cutting Necroquip, playing cards like Fucho in the main or Access Code. I think that this card is very niche. It doesn't come up in most of your games. I would say that you'll probably summon this card in 12 rounds or whatever, 10, 11 rounds of Swish. You might summon this card like 2 or 3 times. But those 2 or 3 times the card actually matters, and it can convert losses into wins. Thank you, Shu. Appreciate it, bro. It can convert losses into wins, which is the most important part. As for the side deck, we played 1 copy of Druid's Worm to finish out the Bishtills, 3 copies of Phantasmate, 3 copies of Ogre. So these were the hand traps we decided to play. We put in all 7 going second in the mirror match. All 7 go in for 7 engine cards. Post side, our engine is very, very, very slim. Very, very, very slim. Very, very slim engine. But it's fine because you're going second. You're playing with their cards. You have bodies on the board, etc. It's chill, right? Can you explain why you didn't play Mochami? Well, I'll explain it. So I thought it was very good. Then for this weekend, instead of cross out, we decided to play 3 copies of Triple Tactic Thrust with 1 TTT, 1 Barrier, and 1 DDG. So this was kind of our answer to Tenpai along with the Fuko. So we can talk about them together. These 6 cards were our answer to Fucho, and Fucho makes Snake Eye Ash and Bonfire and out to Dimensional Shifter. But most Tenpai players know about it and they won't let these cards resolve. But Thrust, being able to set a card like D-Barrier, was our answer to the Tenpai deck. We were afraid of Tenpai after it winning Euro. We were convinced that Tenpai would have a crazy amount of representation at this event, which we weren't wrong, but it did not translate into Top Cut. I guess that people were super prepared for Tenpai this event. People weren't trying to get cheesed, you know? But we played Thrust with D-Barrier as our answer. This was our answer to Tenpai. And in order to make Thrust a good card in the mirror match, we played DDG along with it. And to make it an actual go first card against the mirror match that is like proactive, we played a Tactics with it. So we played 3 copies of Thrust and Tactics and DDG against the mirror when we go first. And against Tenpai, we put in 3 Tactics or 3 Thrust, TTT, and D-Bear when we go first. Yeah, so that was kind of our idea. Thrust was it was alright. I don't know if I would play it again. It was a cool idea, but there were different ways to tackle the Tenpai matchup. What Susi wanted to do was he wanted to play Crossout still, and just play one copy of Dimensional Shifter with it and just call it a day with the Fuko. He wanted to do this. I didn't want to do this. I really was sold on trying Thrust, but the issue with Thrust was is it's not very good as a go first card in the mirror. It's not powerful enough in the mirror match. Like you would always rather draw a cross out than a Thrust in the mirror match. The only saving grace for Thrust was the concept that if your opponent uses Fiendsmith or Bestials you can thrust into tactics in order to look at their hand, which was kind of cool, because like you're not going to have cross out for a Bestial usually, or you're not going to want to use cross out on a Bestial because it's not value, it's like very low value, it's a -1, they keep it in their hand and they summon it next turn. So like Thrust was like, okay, you Bestial me, I go tactics, look at hand, or like tactic, or Thrust go bonfire, or Thrust go 1-for-1, or Thrust go track. Like it can grab your broken one of normal spells, you know. So yeah, that was the idea behind those. And then Fuko to go with that for the tempo match. And then Access Code. Access Code was probably the worst card in the side deck. I sided this card in every match I played going second, and I summoned it 0 times. I played 12 rounds of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I summoned this card 0 times. 0 times. This card would not be in my side deck again. I don't think the way that the format is right now is very good for this card. This card is like, if you stop them from setting up on you and you set up like a board, you win the game. Like you don't need to kill them. You can kill them over the course of a couple turns. You don't ever have to like kill them on the first turn. So this card was kind of useless. All right, so it's 2 questions that I want to answer. One, how do you play against Stun? Stun was a deck that like we were afraid of Stun, but Stun is like a deck that like, even if you put in cards like even if you side cards like Cosmic Cyclone or Feather Duster or whatever you want to put in, it doesn't even fix the win rate against the deck. So say for instance we played Cosmic Cyclone in the side. Cosmic Cyclone isn't a card that, okay, if I draw Cosmic Cyclone, I win the game. Like there isn't really a card that if you draw against Stun, you really win the game that you would want to play in your deck. You would be siding a card for a matchup that you might play one of in the entire tournament. It's a deck that like you're not going to play multiple of usually. You're only going to play one, if any. Like Stun is a deck that like if you put like have a range for how many Stun you're going to play against, it's like 0 to 1. I will say this, in Riley, Indy, Nationals, and this event, that might be 40 rounds of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the last 40 rounds of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! I played against 0 Stun in the last 40 rounds of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I played. And it's probably more. It's probably close to 50 rounds of Yu-Gi-Oh! I played 0 Stun in the last 50 rounds of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! I played against 0 Stun. So, Stun is like a deck that you don't really have to play. It's not really a deck that you're gonna play. At least from my perspective. It's like a deck that like you might play one of in a tournament, if any. And Stun is like a deck that like you'll only really play against, in my opinion, if you lose very early. Say if you lose the first 3 or 4 rounds, I think your chance of playing against Stun increases. I think if you're like undefeated or doing very well, like round 6, 7, 8 undefeated like area, or X1, round 8, round 7, you're not gonna play against Stun. Stun is like X2. Like if you're X2 on the bubble, you might play against Stun. Like if you're undefeated, there's like 1 or 2 Stun players that do very well. Like Johnny does very well, and then Danny. But like there's not really a lot of Stun players that you're gonna see at XO table. You're not gonna see them. But yeah, so that's the main deck. And then as for Molcharmy, why did we not play Molcharmy? This Molcharmy, I will play. I will play this Molcharmy. This Molcharmy, it's not that good. The card is just not that good. Molcharmy is a card that the mind game factor is more impressive than the actual card. I feel like when you activate Molcharmy, your opponent scrambles. I will say this, every time my opponent activated Molcharmy on me, I just played as if the card was not there. Because they're either going to have to hope that they draw hand traps that interact well with what I'm doing at the time. Because like if I normal summon Snake Eye Ash and that first draw isn't a Veiler or Imperm, you're cooked. Like if you don't have a Veiler or Imperm in your hand and you go Molcharmy and I normal summon Snake Eye Ash and you draw like a Bestial, it's like, okay, sure, I'll keep playing. Like I don't care. Like your first draw has to be a Veiler and Imperm. That's how I treat the card. If your first draw is not a Veil or Imperm, like, you're not in a good position. Because I'm only giving you 2 draws. Unless my hand is bad, I'm only giving you 2 draws, so you're only getting a +1, really. You're only really getting a +1. The card, like, every time I have Molchummy, every time you have Molchummy in your hand, just imagine if instead of having a Molchummy, you had an actual hand trap in your hand. Not to mention that Molchummy can get ashed. Because, like, if your hand trap trades with an Ash Blossom is not good. And it's not the same thing as Fiendsmith, because Fiendsmith is a body that you can use again on the opponent's turn. If Chummy gets Ash, it's a -1, and it's not even, it's like terrible. Like, imagine, like, your opponent has Snake Eye Ash plus Witch, and they draw an Ash. The Ash was a non-engine that they would have for your turn. They trade it with your hand trap, and Snake Eye Ash plus Witch beats you by itself. They don't even need the Ash in order to win. So it's not even a good trade. It's not like, oh, now they don't have an Ash for my turn and I can, like, break the board. No, Snake Eye Ash plus Witch is FTKing you. You're losing. Like, the Ash never mattered in the situation. You're giving the Ash value with your hand trap, instead of it just being a real hand trap and you just, like, trying to stop them, you know? Thrust is when you go first against Tenpai. I mean, yes, Thrust is for Tenpai. We played these cards in order to make it playable in the mirror, but it was subpar. I don't know if I'd play Thrust again. It wasn't that great. It was good against Tenpai. It just wasn't good in the mirror. Like, I'd rather have, like, a cross out every time. And the issue was I was too stubborn. Like, I was very mindset. I was like, my mind was set on playing Thrust, when in reality, what Susi wanted to do is he just wanted to play Crossout and just side a copy of Shifter for Crossout and just call it a day with this. And he was like, yeah, we can side, like, 1 Shifter with Crossout. And he was like, if you don't want to do that, we can, like, side Chandra instead. He was like, we can play 3 Crossout and 1 Chandra on the side, or 3 Crossout, 1 Shifter on the side. But I was, like, very, like, stubborn, and I was very, like, set on playing Thrust. I was, like, under the impression that Thrust was just so broken against Tenpai, because I expected way more Tenpai than there actually was, because it won Euros. So, but yeah, that's the deck list. Having played it a few times, Thrust sounds a lot better than in theory than it is in practice. Yeah, basically. In theory, it seemed like the best card. It seemed like the card that solved all of our issues. But in practice, it was like every time I drew Thrust, plus like a Snake. So say for instance, my hand is like Snake Eye Ash, Witch, Thrust. I'm like kind of scared. I'm like, I can potentially lose this game. You know? Like, if it's a cross out, I'm like, okay, game is over. On to the next match, you know? So, that's kind of it. I'm going to end the YouTube video here. If you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time.